Hello and welcome to the Indus Report. Today we are going to discuss about the ongoing military structure changes in India and the various reasons behind it. For this, we have with us a well-known defense analyst and a strategy maker, Shri Abhijit Iyer-Mitra. Namaskar, sir, and welcome to the Indus Report.
Namaste, Mihir. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. A short introduction of him would be that he's a research fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, IPCS, which is a think tank based in Delhi for formulating strategies for the government of India and other organizations. His research primarily focuses on the nuclear policy of India and the defense policy in general. Uh, Sir, my first question to you. We know this fact that India as a nation has never first attacked any country directly using its military. So, is it because our tradition or our current law mandates us to do so, or do we fear about economic or political losses, or is it just that we don't ever care about our unstable neighborhoods?
This story that we've never attacked anybody historically is simply not true. We attacked lots of people. I think till the 7th century, we were an extremely violent people. The Gupta Empire didn't expand into Afghanistan, and the Maurya Empire didn't expand into Afghanistan, turning the other cheek, right? And I know this statement was made by President Abdul Kalam. And what's curious is that it was from his own home state of Tamil Nadu that the Chora king, Rajendra Chora, launched that huge, massive fleet, which traveled 4,000 kilometers and conquered the whole of Malaysia.
Yeah.
Destroyed the Sri Vijaya Empire, in fact, completely destroyed. Look at it, that's the first instance of long-range naval power projection, much more so than Julius Caesar going and invading Britain or the Greeks sailing and destroying Troy. Because if you look at those distances, there were islands in between. You look at the English Channel, it's nothing. You can swim across the English Channel. Well, a good swimmer can swim across the English Channel. So you had this history of significant imperialism. They say the Brihadishwara temple in Tanjore was built with slave labor from Sri Lanka. So, we love to concoct these false histories for ourselves, to give us legitimacy. The Delhi Sultanate, the Mughal Empire, they all attacked outside India as well. The British Empire attacked outside India, and the British consider themselves a successor state of the Mughal Empire, and the modern Indian Republic considers itself a successor state to British India. So our DNA is to attack people around us. And remember, in 1971. We started the war long before, about at least almost 2 weeks to a month before Pakistan attacked us on the Western Front. So this thing about us not attacking people, it's just a great big myth that we've concocted to, polish our non-violence and mumbo-jumbo thing that we come up with. For example, America. America has supported the worst kind of dictators everywhere in the world. They've bombed people into misery, into absolute misery. You look at Libya, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. I don't think anybody thanks America for giving them freedom and democracy. But the American myth is that the whole world loves America and they want American freedom and democracy, right?
Yeah.
So this is also one of those Indian states founding myths.
But sir, in 1971, I heard this that Pakistan started the war first and then in retaliation. Of course, our planning was before Pakistan's attack, but still.
Declaration of war, yes. The declaration of war, Pakistan attacked our western airfields and then we retaliated in the east.
Yeah,
but remember, the Indian army was already deep inside Bangladesh even before that without declaring war. Right? I think there's no doubt left about that anymore, how deep the Indian army was into Bangladesh. Till, Pakistan's big dilemma was, bhai, ab kya kare? Agar hum declare war karenge, then they will say we started the war. but they've already started the war. They've already started killing our troops. They've already come deep inside our country and things like that. And of course, in a sense, it was retaliation for 1965. Which is fine. But, this thing about India being peaceful and so on and so forth, it doesn't work. It's one of those foreign policy myths that we propagate. And it's fine. It's good, as long as it's meant for the common people to have as a myth. For a policy analyst to say that India has never attacked foreign countries, it just shows bad historical knowledge.
Yeah, yeah. But what is stopping us now? I mean, we have got our independence. We have a
What's
strong
stopping
military.
us now is, I think there's been a huge change in the way the world views wars. Okay, the tolerance for international warfare is much reduced. You'll see the UN always goes into huddles and probably tries to curb it more effectively than it used to during the Cold War. In the Cold War, invariably one side used to veto it and things like that. Number one. Number two, the cost of war is extremely high. Never forget that. 71, the consequences of 71 ultimately led to the emergency in 77. All right. The cost of the war, the cost of the refugees, the oil embargo that then came in 1973 at the end of the Yom Kippur War, all of them, they got compounded, and then that led to Indira Gandhi's declaration of emergency in 1975. So we need to remember all these things very, very carefully before we get into war. Even now, you look at war reserves. There are a lot of issues. There's also a fundamental mistrust of the military within the bureaucracy and within politicians. They fundamentally believe that the army keeps giving them bad advice or bad information, and I've seen this across the spectrum. It doesn't matter. People think it's just the babus. It's not just the babus. It's also the politicians. Even today, if you sit down and talk to politicians, it doesn't matter BJP or Congress, they will sit and tell you how many times they've personally been lied to. There's very little trust, which is a very problematic issue. So there's lots of things. I mean, nothing is ever monocausal. There's lots of little issues. There's the economic thing. There's the social stress within India. There's sort of an inability to deal with the narrative, an inability to project India's point of view abroad, a lack of confidence that the world will support us, a lack of confidence about how long we can hold out, uh, uh, plus this huge civil military tension that exists in India.
Yeah. So, what are the current changes in the military structures all about? Like we saw in 2017, I guess, introduction to a new office, the office of CDS, the Chief of Defence Staff, and they told it's the first amongst equal position in the military. And after that, a series of ongoing changes. So, can you tell us what actually are these changes undergoing within the military structure?
See, there's the publicly visible changes like the CDS, which is a completely useless office. It's superfluous. It does nothing. It's redundant. Its actual military value and operational value is zero. Its only real value is probably it gave one general significant extension in his retirement, and it created a few more jobs for secretarial staff and office staff, and created a whole new army bureaucracy. And we love our bureaucracies, that anywhere where we can turn 4Gs into babus or make more babus, we love the whole idea of that. So CDS is kind of completely irrelevant, just like IDS was irrelevant. CDS isn't the first attempt at jointness. The first attempt was integrated defense stuff. And when it came, everybody was like, yes, this is going to lead to a lot of jointness of operations and this and that and la di da. It led to nothing. You have a completely useless office that has been set up, that has done nothing in the last god knows how many 15, 20 years that it's been set up in. They also have their own think tank called Senjos, which has done again nothing. Center for Joint Warfare Studies, I think, that has also done nothing. so on and so forth. So you've got lots of these things. We keep trying to do these things, but these are the superficial changes. They add up to nothing. They will add up to nothing. The real changes you need to look at are certain things that seem to have happened on the ground. Number one is Balakot. Balakot was the symptom. What it did was, so far, all our responses to Pakistan were ground for ground, right? And it used to be caliber for caliber, which is to say, if they fired mortars at us, we would fire mortars at them. If they fired cannons at us, we would fire cannons at them. But if they only used, low caliber weapons like rifles and things like that, we would only use that. Greater than caliber to caliber had to be authorized from the center. And even there, it would only be tumne jo kiya, or it would only be a ground based solution. Now, the problem with ground based solutions is it's force on force. Air based solutions are fundamentally you bypass force. So, Balakot was a huge psychological change. It was a huge change in military stance. It was a huge change in Pakistan even beginning to fathom what India was willing to do. It was a huge change in where we struck. Pakistan's belief was that Kashmir will only lead to a Kashmir retaliation. But India showed that a Kashmir action will lead to a Pakistan retaliation because Balakot is in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, right?
Yeah.
So there were all these things. Pakistan, there has been a lobby within Pakistan that said, well, 65 was different. We did something in Kashmir, but they attacked across the international border in Rajasthan and things like that. So why should we restrict ourselves to that? And what India showed was that this belief that India would only respond to Kashmir in Kashmir was wrong, that we were willing to go back to the 65 paradigm, but not just take it to ground on ground. It would also be air to ground. Now, there's lots of things out here if you notice. One is the willingness to hit deep inside Pakistan. Remember, Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa have never been attacked by the Indian military period for a long time, at least since 71, as far as I know, till open hostile warfare. This was the first time we did that. And in retaliation for a terror strike, for a sub-state terror strike, not even for a state terror strike, not for a state act of war, for a sub-state terror strike. So there were all these issues that came in, and it really shook up the Pakistanis quite significantly. Now, what's happened in the Indian military mindset since then is somewhat different. We've realized that we can't do ground for ground anymore. So there's a focus on air forces and what the air force can do. There is a belief now, quite rightly, by the way, that the air force will yield much better, kya kehte hain use, bang for buck in terms of options for the leadership. And the second mindset change has been, if you look at the Air Force Act, the Air Force isn't allowed to be used for internal security and things like that. And that was mainly because if you remember when all these things were written, you remember World War II and the bombing campaigns, the mass bombing campaigns of World War II, they would mostly kill civilians. Air power was an extremely imprecise tool of war. Ground forces were much more precise. Today, that has changed. The Air Force is extraordinarily precise. It's probably the most precise because the Air Force has the highest technology threshold, then the Navy, then the Army. So the precision by the Air Force is remarkable. And what happens in those circumstances is that the military leadership now has opened it up as a viable option. We're finally coming of age what the rest of the world, what Iran and China saw America do in 1991, we have finally been able to do in 2019.
Yeah, but if you are saying that the office of CDS, like it's just I mean, if you say that there is no such thing for CDS to do, but then what is the reason why India felt the need of these changes, and who is the mind behind suggesting these changes?
These days, we never know who the mind behind any changes are. But why we do it is we very frequently confuse activity for achievement. We think giving speeches is policy, giving speeches is not policy. We think going to the UN and thumping our fists on the table is policy. It is not policy. Policy is extremely unattractive primary research that your diplomats and bureaucrats need to do, which they seldom or never do, which then gets accumulated into actionable points on the ground. So in India, we've always had this big tamasha कि जब हम कुछ कर नहीं सकते हैं तो हम नाटक करते हैं. And that is what you see out here. This isn't the first time. Like I said, IDS is a classic example of it. You look at the foreign policy responses to the Delhi riots. The Delhi riots were a continuum. They started with the Seelampur riots. They went on to Shaheen Bagh, and then they culminated in the Delhi riots. And what was the foreign minister doing throughout? Nothing, not a single.
Sir, can you see me?
Perfect.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I hope my internet will not suck.
वो तो सभी का होता है, मेरा भी कभी-कभी हो जाता है. The problem in this country is you don't get the kind of stable internet you need at any given point of time.
Yeah. Okay, so shall we continue, sir?
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. So, any reasons why India felt the need of these changes, like the introduction of the office of CDS, and who is the mind behind suggesting these changes?
I don't know who the mind is. We seldom know where these policies originate from, though, as in who took the decision. The talk of a CDS has been there for a very long time. But, in India, what happens is we substitute activity for achievement. So we think by creating a new office, you can solve problems where you haven't discussed the fundamental issues involved, right? IDS was an attempt to do the same thing. That also failed. So instead of going into the root causes of why that failed, you then set up another office. So IDS ka pura tumne bureaucracy create kar diya. Now you want to create another set of bureaucracy, like the IAS ever solved any problems of India, but then you insist on taking the military and turning it into the IAS as well. Or the military seems to aspire to become IAS. I don't know what it is. But this is a long running thing, boss. How long have you heard about India, indigenization, make in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, things like that? कब से हम टेक्नोलॉजी इंपोर्ट करके ट्राइंग टू इंडिजिनाइज इट. ठीक है, यू इंपोर्टेड द नैट एंड ट्राइड टू मेक इंडिजिनस प्लेन, यू डिडंट सक्सीड. You had the Marut, which was a very decent plane which could have been developed. You didn't do that. Then you decide you're going to get the MiG-21. You build 400 of those. Did you manage to indigenize? No. You get the Jaguar and you try to make an indigenous plane from that. No. You get 270 plus Sukhois. And if you read the newspaper reports of the time, it was, this is going to make us completely independent. The engines are going to make us, we're going to produce our own engines, we're going to produce our own planes after this, so on and so forth. No, it didn't happen. So nobody is bothered about asking the tough questions. We're a good news society. If you give people bad news, they will say, tum ISI agent ho, tum CIA agent ho, tum foreign arms dealers ke dalle ho. But nobody actually wants to look at the tough questions and give you the tough answers. Which is why that after you've tried to 3-4 planes you've imported in bulk and license manufactured them, claiming that you are going to start up something indigenous, all 4 times you have failed. And you continue with the same thing. You don't change anything, no? And you keep trying as if nothing has happened in the past.
Yeah.
You blame all your failures on foreign conspiracies and arms agents. In a society like that, it's a conspiracy theory prone society. And fundamentally, conspiracy theories and things like that only arise. They take hold of a national psyche when the government starts believing conspiracy theories. It's usually the sign of very bad policy making. And that is the problem in India. So this is one more of those things. This is like, buying the Jaguar to cover up the failure to indigenize the MiG-21, and then buying the Sukhoi to cover up the failure to indigenize the Jaguar and things like that. This is one more attempt at cover up, I guess.
Yeah, but there is some essence to the fact that the three armed forces must have a coordination between them, and so the introduction of the CDS took place. So, do you suggest any changes in like this entire structure? Like, if not CDS, then what? What should be the ideal solution so that
You
the
know,
forces are
you
coordinated?
actually you don't need a CDS. You don't need a CDS. You can you can issue executive orders and say, look, this is going to be the single heavy fighter of the Indian Air Force, and this is going to be the single light fighter of the Indian Air Force. Okay. After that, all of you who want fighters, you only have these two options. You can't go in for the F-18, you can't go in for the F-16 and things like that. Tejas is the lone and only light fighter. Rafale is the lone heavy fighter. इसका naval variant खरीदना है या naval variant बनाना है बनाओ, बाकी सब भाड़ में जाओ. No more competitions. Right now, the Navy is running its own competition, which is aimed at getting the F-18, because they're very clear they don't want the Rafale. Why? Because the Air Force has it. And you don't have the political will to say, screw you. Okay. You also say there is only going to be one long range missile and one short range air to air missile. Whatever it is, narrow down on it. Today, if you look at the Israeli the David Sling missile, it's been adapted in air to air role. It combines two functions: long range radar and long range infrared attack, and short range infrared attack as well. Right. So in fact, even instead of two missiles, you can even bring it down to one missile. If you come up, and now that you know the technology, you can make an indigenous version of it. वो भी नहीं करेंगे. ठीक है. You insist on one kind of tank, one kind of everything, and that's it. That would be a huge first step towards rationalizing your industrial this thing. Ensuring, for example, the Air Force only works fixed wing aircraft and the Army only works rotary wing aircraft would be another huge thing. Why does the Army need the same helicopters that the Air Force also needs? Why does the Air Force need attack helicopters and the Army needs to have its own separate attack helicopters? ये कहाँ की बात है भाई? Or you do what Britain has. You have a common helicopter pool where Army, Navy, Air Force get to choose what they want from that common helicopter pool. There are a lot of best practices going on across the world. And, I oppose, these McKinsey and PricewaterhouseCooper driven best practices. They keep advertising it. You should remember these foreign consultancy services, they are usually a way of deflecting blame onto somebody when your bureaucracy is accountable. But in India, where neither your military is accountable nor your bureaucracy is accountable, you don't need consultancies like McKinsey or PricewaterhouseCooper and people like that. Because here, no matter what happens, nobody will ever be held to account and nobody will ever be sacked.
Yeah.
Right? So there are a lot of things you can do, which is just simple executive decision, where the politicians refuse to exercise their executive prerogatives. अब क्या करोगे? And this has a long pattern. Remember, Amitabh Kant, who ran Make in India, was then made the head of your Niti Aayog, even though Make in India didn't bring in a single rupee. Then you relabel Make in India as Atmanirbhar Bharat. By name change. So this is like IDS and CDS. Okay, IDS is Make in India, CDS is Atmanirbhar Bharat.
Yeah. Then also we heard about the initiation of theater commands, like 5 theater commands in the first stage. And what are exactly these theater commands and how are they going to function?
Okay, theater commands was a very bad idea, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
In the north, you face you believe that you will only fight a one-on-one war, but when push comes to shove, you're going to fight a two-front war effectively, right? Uh, and that you always plan for the maximum. If you plan for China, you will be able to deal with Pakistan. But if you plan for Pakistan, you will not be able to deal with China. What you've effectively done is, what is the use of a central command? Tell me. मध्य प्रदेश में क्या होने वाला है आपको? चीनी मध्य प्रदेश में आने वाले हैं क्या? तो सेंट्रल कमांड की क्या जरूरत है आपकी? ठीक है, technically what you needed was a eastern command, a western command, and a peninsular command. Okay, one of these should have been placed under the Air Force, one of these should have been placed under the Navy, and maybe naam ke vaste one should have been given to the army, even though the army does not win battles anymore. It is the Air Force and the Navy that wins battles. Before, the army is the physical manifestation of your victory, but it's the Air Force and Navy that win battles. Technically, you should have just had two commands optimally, because the North Zone is an integrated command. The South Zone is fundamentally a naval. It's a completely different kind of command. Okay. Now, what you do is you're splitting up armies and things like that, 1, 2, 3. If you remember, this is what the Egyptians did against Israel in the Yom Kippur War. They had the first army, the second army, the third army, and things like that. And the way it wasn't a theater command, to be fair. And what the Israelis did was they understood what were the differences in the command structure of the army. So they hit between the two armies. Between 1 and 2 and between 2 and 3, that is where the thrust happened. And then they encircled and destroyed you. So as it is, तुम्हारा Air Force, Navy, Army का coordination नहीं होता है. उसके बाद तुम even within whatever little coordination happens, उसको भी आप theater में बांटना चाहते हो. Okay, and then you want to allocate air assets. Now understand, ground forces will take 2-3 weeks to go for a full force to be shifted from China to the Pakistan front. The Air Force does it in 15 minutes, boss. 15 minutes mein at Mach 2, if you're flying at twice the speed of sound, you can go from the China border to the Pakistan border in about 15 minutes. So a theater command doesn't even make sense in that case. And you want 5 theater commands. Why? Because we love overclassification. This is like GST. बर्फी का ये लगेगा, नॉन लग्जरी टैक्स लगेगा, पर बर्फी जिसमें वर्क है उसमें 12% टैक्स लगेगा, और बर्फी जिसके ऊपर चॉकलेट कोटिंग है उस पे 12% लगेगा, और चॉकलेट कोटिंग के ऊपर जहां वर्क है क्योंकि वो सिल्वर है उसमें फिर 18% लगेगा. And we think this is brilliant. We're doing some amazing thing by using very complicated language and over complicating a very simple thing. We're doing something absolutely brilliant. We do not. You go talk to any halwai or mithai wala, he'll say, boss, मैं क्या बर्फी बेचूं या GST कैलकुलेट करते रहूं सुबह शाम. इस पे 18% टैक्स, इस पे ये, इस पे वो. चावल पैकेट में ये टैक्स नहीं लगेगा, चावल पैकेट में टैक्स लगेगा. And you know, this is they've run for over 70 years. If you still can't understand that complication means a lack of policy finesse, they don't get it. You know, when we were writing academic papers, we were always taught, use simple English. If you use complicated English, the first takeaway is you don't know what you're saying, which is why you're using complicated language to cover up your lack of understanding. Yes. Here they use complicated language because they don't want anybody to know that they're a bunch of duffers, essentially, when it comes to taxes. I suspect that's what's happening here as well. You know, you make it so complicated that it's a responsibility absolving mechanism. The way some countries use consultancy agencies, we use complication.
Yeah. But I guess this all the Office of CDS and the initiation of theater commands, I guess already China and the US military does have these theater commands. Although their needs are different, but still they do have these theater commands.
Look, their needs are extraordinarily different. Remember, China has a budget that is, I believe it is not in China's. In fact, there are a lot of Chinese I know who think that theater command was a big mistake. That they need to have just 3 commands out there: one to deal with Russia, one to deal with the land borders in the west, so India and Vietnam mostly. Though Vietnam, there's even confusion within China, and then a naval command. Okay, but it is what it is. But remember that Xi Jinping is doing deliberately to keep the army off balance, because he's consolidated his hold on the Communist Party so completely. Now the army is the last bastion left, which he's trying to weaken in a sense. So he keeps them in a constant state of confusion. He keeps posting officers left, right, and center. So, for example, he will post a parachute commander into artillery, or he'll post an artillery commander into infantry and things like that. A lot of that is happening, and that is being done entirely to keep the Chinese military off balance so that he can consolidate his power across the board. Which is why he is already stronger than Deng Xiaoping ever was. He's going to attain probably.
हे भगवान, मेरा इंटरनेट
कहाँ छूटा हमारा?
Deng Xiaoping.
He got Deng Xiaoping.
Yeah.
So let me just put out the cigarette.
Yeah.
So Xi Jinping does it for a certain reason. America is completely different. They're a global power that have 7-8 aircraft carrier task forces, thousands of kilometers. They're literally across the globe. So for them, having theater commands is a completely different thing.
Yeah.
हमारे लिए, with a limited budget, at most I can accept you have 3. I would say optimally 2, but 3 would be good. Why? Because in the south, you don't need infantry. You don't need that much air force also. It should be a purely naval command that, looks after the entire this thing, where everybody is subordinate to the navy. In the north, you need just one theater command then, because you need both the air force and infantry and armor and all of that. And your air force is it's your primary response and things like that. That needs to be under the air force. But just because the army will never agree to that and you need to throw a bone to the army, I'm still willing to agree कि भाई एक western command रख लो जो army के नीचे आता है नाम के वास्ते. No. The Air Force opposed this, The Air Force and the Navy were never in support of theater commands because it forces them to. The fluidity of the Air Force, the fluidity of the Navy gets compromised when you have different theaters.
Yeah.
But this is what you get. This is what happens when you don't think things through. Usne kaha, isne kaha, unhone kiya, wo kiya. It is not an organic process that starts in India. It's copying other people based on doctrines you don't fully understand or don't know how to apply. And of course, the one thing about the defense ministry is I have not met a single person in the defense ministry or the military who understands defense economics properly. And when they do, they don't want to face the fact that India has a limited defense budget. उनको लगता है पैसा पेड़ पे उगता है. Okay, best of luck to you. Congratulations.
Yeah. Actually, the chief of defense staff, when interviewed by news agencies, he actually told that the theater commands are actually designed in a way that we can work efficiently within the allocated budget. Like, I'm going to come to that budget question also, but if you can still summarize why he said so, and if he has that confidence in him that.
General Rawat says a lot of things I don't understand. He says a lot of things I don't understand. So I don't know why he said that. Because I think if you take past examples in India or even past examples abroad, it does not lead to greater efficiency. So I'm very curious what his rationale is. I didn't see him actually give an explanation because nobody pressed him for micro details on it. Did you read any micro details? Because I haven't been able to find any.
Actually, I found one thing in, I would not name the news agency, but they actually had an interview with him, and there he told that we took into consideration a limited defense budget, and so in order to efficiently handle like all the military stuff from the Air Force and the Navy and the Army. Hence, we had this this central authority like the CDS, and then will pass on the commands to the theta commands, like the
So
crux
no
of what he
micro
said.
detail. He just made generic. So he just made generic statements like this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's because there probably won't be any micro detail. You ask for a costing of how this would be more efficient, they'll never give it to you.
Mhm.
कोई RTI फाइल करके देखो ना,
Yeah.
कुछ नहीं मिलेगा, कुछ नहीं मिलेगा. Best of luck.
Yeah. And if India's military, which is seen today as a non-intruding or the inward-looking force concerned primarily only about the defense of India, will it happen now that this military would be more outward-looking, or the military which can showcase hard power of our country and can protect Indian interests outside our soil? Can it happen?
नहीं, no, impossible.
Impossible.
Impossible. At best, it's a status quo kind of our military. You really can't project power much outside. Maybe Sri Lanka, Maldives, Bangladesh, even with Pakistan we can do a lot. The issue is at what point do Pakistan's tactical nuclear weapons come into play, right? That's highly problematic out there.
Mm.
So with China, though, I would have said if you'd focused more on air power, then you could have created a serious threat. But right now, look, you'll manage for the first 30 days. But after 30 days is when the issue of their industrial strength comes into play.
Uh,
Uh, no, we're not capable of doing much.
uh,
No.
I think.
Because, like I said, we're a good news society. We don't like bad news. We
Hmm.
don't want to introspect. Anybody who gives you bad news is immediately a traitor. So enjoy.
Yeah, but I do think that we actually do not have any interest outside India. Like China has its interest in Africa; it is heavily investing there. US had or has interests everywhere in the world, and it has military bases everywhere in the world. So if you have interest, then you can protect your interests. So does India have any interest outside its soil in the first place?
We actually have a whole load of interest. Airtel is one of the biggest providers of mobile phonery in Africa. Uh, I think Tata or TVS is a huge supplier to South America. You have your ISRO stations, telemetry stations in Brunei and places like that. You do have interests. The issue is, are you willing to bite the bullet and go protect them? We're not.
Okay, so the reason why we cannot, because we do not have the capacity, or
Nobody
we do
thinks
not
about
have.
these things.
Okay.
No, I didn't say we cannot. I said we do not. We do not because remember, right now the interests in both South America and Africa are mostly private.
Hmm.
Okay, there's one acquisition which I think is not private, which is the uranium mine in Niger or in Mali. Where is it? Which is very important,
Mhm.
which is a very, very important asset. But no, it's in Niger, not in Mali. Uh, uh, but I think there's local security. You don't need the kind of high security because we're not building things in, say, Pakistan, where you're going to face a terror attack every day. Um, so yeah, look, as your economy expands, the need for you to uh, protect your foreign interests will expand.
Hmm.
When you're essentially a second tier power which does not have a global presence, you don't have the kind of state interests to protect abroad. So it's a reflection of the fact that you're a second tier power. We talk like we're a first tier power. The reality is we're a second tier power.
Yeah. So if we like successfully implement these structural changes, and if ever it happens that India's military becomes more outward facing, then would the burden of India's defense lie majorly on the paramilitary forces? Can you shed light on what would be the position of paramilitary forces after the execution of these structural changes?
Mm. if these changes are successfully implemented, understand these changes have been successfully implemented. The point is they're not meant to change anything on the ground. The point is they're meant to buy a lot of time for corrupt bureaucrats and corrupt military to make commissions and things like that and change absolutely nothing on the ground. Okay. So they have been successfully implemented. They've bought the 10 years required for people to say, kuch kaam nahi kiya hai, now come up with a third bureaucracy. Right now you have IDS and CDS. In 10 years, they will all say, now you need a joint chiefs of staff. So in addition to integrated defense staff and CDS, you will have a joint chiefs of staff with another secretariat, another bureaucracy, one more past use by date general leading it up or whatever leading it up and things like that. So it has been successfully implemented. The problem is you are confusing who it is a success for. People think it's a success for India. It is not. It's a success for retirement age people and certain bureaucracies that want certain kinds of money to be made. That is the main this thing.
Okay.
So it's been a great success, but it'll change nothing on the ground.
Yeah, it
so
sounds like
boss. God success hua.
It sounds like quite pessimistic.
Biggest success since the 1971 war for India.
Yeah, it sounds
when
quite
people
pessimistic.
ask what was the defining military moment, when historians ask what was that defining military moment, was it the surrender of Dhaka or was it making General Rawat the CDS? Every historian will say it was making General Rawat the CDS. इसकी तो फोटो लगने चाहिए हर सरकारी ऑफिस में. द फर्स्ट सीडीएस का फोटो, वो ढाका का ये सरेंडर का फोटो उतारो, सीडीएस का फोटो लगाओ.
Okay, then now to another question. So when we look at the defense budget annually, we find that more than half of it is reserved for pensions for the retired officers. And as we saw that CDS once said that we are running low on the monetary front. So we needed to have some changes within the structure in order to sustain. That's what he said. Well, I cannot suggest a way how they are going to make sure that most of the budget actually goes to procuring weapons and technology and to reduce the percentage going for the pension. But if we decide to do so, that is to reduce the percentage of defense budget going to pension, can lateral entry into the armed forces be a feasible alternative to the SSB
No,
entry?
it isn't, because the nature of the modern military is you need a heck of a lot of training. राइट. शॉर्ट सर्विस कमीशन आपका 5 साल में 3 साल तो आपके ट्रेनिंग में ही चले जाता है, फिर 2 साल आप लड़ोगे, फिर क्या होगा? ठीक है ना. Lateral entry, boss, is not for the bureaucracy. It may work, it doesn't work for the military. Okay. What you need is serious downsizing.
A serious downsizing
you need
of the military.
Navy of all the military.
Okay.
That is how you reduce a pension burden. That is how you focus on capital. That is how you turn from a quantity military to a quality military.
Yeah.
You prioritize what you want to do. So for people talking about all this reducing pensions, they want to have mountain divisions, essentially fight uphill battles, literally fight uphill battles. Knowing the fact that the Chinese hold the higher ground.
Yeah.
How do you expect to take something like that seriously? When they knew what the costs of those new mountain divisions were.
Yeah.
It was probably easier buying one additional squadron of Rafales that would have given you much more security than one additional mountain division. Because this is your inter-services rivalry. उन्होंने किया तो हमको भी किया. You need an army. You need to cut it down to about, right now you're at 1.1 million men. You need to cut it down to about 300,000 to 400,000 men.
Oh, that's small.
And understand, for the kind of borders we have, Pakistan highly problematic, China equally problematic, though tactically not so hot. How do you make those 300,000 or 400,000 men competitive in the face of overwhelming odds? That is what you need to be doing. You need to be cutting down your air force to about 50, 60,000 men. Your navy is kind of optimal, but say bring it down to 50,000. Then you automatically reduce the pensions budget. You then bring in synchronization of military and police, which is that all because your fighting age is up to about 40 तक लड़ सकते हो. उसके बाद your combat efficiency, you can't get older people to fight.
Yeah.
After that, you transition them into state police. You say there is an automatic place reserved for you in police, and that way the budget transitions from a defense budget to a police budget.
Police budget.
The state, the burden is passed on to the states. Plus, remember, you get highly trained people entering your police. If you're passing this on to the state budget, remember you're also absorbing the training budget of the states.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very synergistic entry process. You do that. Okay. And you can have, and India is anyway a chronically under police state. We've got what, about 300 to 600,000 police maximum where I read. You need something like, you need a ratio of about 1:300, which means you need what? 1:1,000 would be about would be 13 million. Uska 1/3 karo, you need about 3-4 million police. This would be a fantastic way to boost up those numbers and create the police reforms that you need. See, policy can't be done in silos. Policy has to be done across the board. So ये बात करते हैं, oh, pensions are so great, it's such a huge burden on us. भाई pensions किसने create किया? खुदा ने तुमको दिया क्या ये force structure? ये force structure तो इसी जनरल रावत ने ही बनाया था ना. आपकी CDS has also created this. Your CDS actually expanded the force, the size of the army. He was a big supporter of the mountain divisions. तो कहां से, his ability to deflect blame towards other people is fantastic. He doesn't even want to take responsibility for his own actions.
Yeah.
करो, मेरा क्या जाता है? Well, मेरा tax जाता है.
But would that make sense? Because even if we bring the retired army officers or the retired military generals into the police service, still they are above the age.
No, not retired. You don't want these retired old fogies. मैंने देखा है, you don't want them anywhere. What I'm saying is, when you're fighting troops, I'm not talking about officers, I'm talking about the Jawans.
Yeah.
Okay. When they reach the saturation point, see, military and police are two different skill sets. In the military, you shoot first and ask questions later. With internal security and police, you ask questions and then you shoot.
Yeah. There's fundamental.
I'm oversimplifying it, but understand, I'm oversimplifying it for a reason.
Yeah.
When you are young, you tend to be trigger happy. Those are the skill sets you need in the military. When you tend to grow older, you tend to be more circumspect. Those are the skill sets you need in the police and internal security. Because the standard you use for dealing with Pakistanis can't be the standard you use in an internal security operation either.
Yeah.
और उस इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी में भी कितने सारे फोर्सेस लगा के रखे हो. एक जगह बीएसएफ, एक जहां सीआईएसएफ, एक जहां सीआरपीएफ, एक इंडो टिबेटन बॉर्डर पुलिस, पता नहीं क्या क्या कितने. अगेन ग्रेवी ट्रेन, पैसा बनाओ, कोई ये नहीं है भाई. बॉर्डर उधर है, then why do you have BSF Jawans in all kinds of other internal security operations?
Yeah.
So this is the kind of rubbish we keep doing without thinking things through. And there is no attempt at a first principles approach of looking what your needs are and how to fix that.
Yeah.
You need one internal security force. Okay. You need one police, which needs to be, so paramilitary, military, paramilitary, and you need a paramilitary. Why? Because you have so many internal insurgencies. Otherwise, you wouldn't need a paramilitary. And then your police force. The bulk needs to be the police force, then the paramilitary, because the police, if you have good police coverage, you automatically reduce the level of insurgencies to
Hmm.
an extent. Then you need a paramilitary just to get in जहां बर्दाश्त से बाहर हो जाती है पुलिस के लिए. That is where your paramilitary goes in. One police paramilitary, not 15 different paramilitaries. Okay, and you need one military.
Hmm.
Right now, you have the military doing all kinds of things it shouldn't be doing, like internal security. You have the paramilitary doing all kinds of things which shouldn't be doing, which is external security. And you have a police that should be policing technically, which should also have been divided into detective work and enforcement work, and they're too understaffed to do anything.
Hmm. Hmm.
You have one which is overstaffed, one which is understaffed. Why can't you shift one to the other?
Yeah.
They won't.
Okay. So, how is the current scenario in India regarding the research and development for the military needs? Will India, which for decades imported technology and weapons from Soviets, then from US, Israel, can now we be able to make such technology at home and export it outside, or just use it for
देख
ourselves?
भाई, अगले 50 साल के लिए कुछ नहीं होने वाला है. अगले 50 साल के लिए ये आत्मनिर्भर भारत का तमाशा होते रहेगा और तुम्हारा इंपोर्ट भी चलते रहेगा. I'll give you a written guarantee. I'll give you a written guarantee that even 50 years down the line, we will be having the same conversations that we've been having. These conversations we're having, I have been hearing them through the 80s, as far back as I can remember.
Yeah.
And in 2020, we're having the same conversation we were having in 1989, 1990, 1991.
Hmm.
50 years down the line, you will be having the same conversations because, again, nobody wants to deal with the root causes of the problem.
Hmm.
इस देश का कोई कल्याण हो ही नहीं सकता है. It's just going to continue as it is.
Okay. And another question regarding like we are talking about exports. So, can the quadrilateral like the quad group of India, Japan, Australia, and US, can such alliances help the security needs of our country?
Huge. But the point is, you have to understand what the differences here are.
Hmm.
These three countries, they can coordinate seamlessly because they follow the exact same standards and procedures. They have completely intercompatible equipment and things like that. You do not.
Oh.
And when you are not intercompatible with these guys, completely, seamlessly intercompatible, then in modern warfare, remember a lot in pre-modern warfare, and well, not pre-modern, but even in World War I and II, a lot of your casualties used to be blue on blue fire, which is to say friendly fire.
Hmm.
And that used to become a huge problem. One of the things that modern technology has done is you can be absolutely confident of killing the other person without injuring any of your own.
Hmm.
If not, then you have a serious problem within. We are not intercompatible with those three militaries. जो है intercompatibility वो बहुत कम है. Synergy only happens when you are fully intercompatible. नहीं तो फिर synergy हो ही नहीं सकता है.
Hmm.
ठीक है ना? तो is it good? Yes. But there's a lot more that needs to be done. Right now, it's
Hmm.
performing suboptimally.
Yeah.
I would say it's performing at about 10 to 15%.
It
And
will
that's
perform
about it.
better. It will perform better if India has this intercompatibility with this other three militaries, right? So by the intercompatibility, you mean like we have the weapons of the same version as the other three carry, or the training as same as the other three military personnel would have?
All, both.
Yeah.
Uh, the same kind of equipment with the same kind of training.
Hmm. Yeah. And
The
also
issue
this, yeah.
is how much are you willing to spend on that training?
Hmm.
Because Australia, Japan, and America spend a heck of a lot of money on individual soldiers. We spend that money on Republic Day parade.
Yeah. Quad.
We spend that money on having we, we spend that money on having 50 marching bands on Republic Day, none of whom can hold a tune properly. तो 50 मार्चिंग बैंड होंगे आपके, उसी से आपकी औकात पता चल जाती है ना। और उन 50 बैंड में से एक भी बंदा एक ट्यून होल्ड नहीं कर सकता है ठीक से। मौज करो।
Well, but this quad is like only been constituted because we have a common enemy, which is China. But India sure has Pakistan on one end. So how can we deal with Pakistan if we have to like coordinate with some other military?
I'll tell you what, that's not a valid point. I'll tell you why. Because if you can deal with China, you can deal with Pakistan.
Yeah.
Right. But if you get your China tactics in place, there are very few things that Pakistan has that you have to do additional stuff for. One would be the F-16s, and the other would be the Pakistani Augusta class submarines. ठीक है? Baki sub is the same as dealing with China in that sense.
But if we actually get into a war situation,
that is fine.
If we actually get into the war situation, then these three countries would help India to counter China. But if we enter into a war with Pakistan, will they coordinate with us at that time?
Why do you need them?
Yeah, because like
why do you need them in a war with Pakistan?
Okay, so you say that our military alone is sufficient for?
It's more than sufficient for it.
But
what
with
you probably
China,
need is international diplomatic coordination. Pakistan doesn't use, to see to it that Pakistan doesn't use tactical nuclear weapons. But other than that, you don't. Why do you need other countries to help you out, boss?
Yeah, but with China, the similar thing. With China, even like, why would we need the coordination of three militaries?
China की औकात क्या है? हमारी औकात क्या है? What Pakistan is to us, we are to China.
Okay.
What Piddi is to Rahul Gandhi, Pakistan is to India, and India is to China.
Okay. Yeah,
हम
yeah.
चाइना के पिद्दी हैं। ना हमारी औकात नहीं है, हमारी इंडस्ट्रियल औकात नहीं है, हमारी और कोई औकात नहीं है, हमारी फाइनेंशियल औकात नहीं है, हमारी इंडस्ट्रियल औकात नहीं है। In terms of sure, are we qualitatively better than them in certain instances? Yes. Will we be able to hold our own in for 20-30 days? Absolutely. We can probably give them a pretty bloody nose in 20-30 days. Huh? After that, what? Okay. Yeah. And it always helps when you have people who divert. Even America doesn't even have to do anything, but say Australia, Japan, and America, for those 30 days, managed to send 4 or 5 aircraft carriers and 30-40 destroyers to the Chinese eastern seaboard. It forces China to prevent a concentration of its forces and keep half of it bogged down on the other side. This is what the Soviets agreed to do for us in 1971, remember? That they said we will move our troops in the northern border so that China can't divert all its forces down south to prevent you from separating Bangladesh. तो हमारी औकात नहीं है. That's why you need these when dealing with China. China की economy की size देखो, boss.
Yeah.
That's why you need them.
Yeah, well, thank you, sir, for lending us your precious time and answering all of our questions very patiently. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mihir. Great talking to you. Take care.
Yes, same to you, sir.